Good Sunday evening, everybody. Meteorologist Casey Cloud here in the Weather Center with this special report on Tropical Storm Eta as it does approach here South Florida and the Florida Keys. Already getting some impacts there, and you can kind of see this storm system doesn't look like a really intense one, but you can see where we have that center of rotation here. I'll point it out with my mouse right now as we're looking off the Keys. Now, in a stronger system, a more typical type system, you would have some more thunderstorm or at least heavy rain activity around the center. But this is more of a hybrid type system, so a more spread out type scenario where you have some rain a little bit more to the north there with some of those heavier showers that could cause some flash flooding here as we look later toward the timeline. But as you kind of see down here toward the south, we have what you could kind of term as an eye. It's the center. It's not a hurricane, and it doesn't show up on satellite. It's pretty disorganized on satellite, as you can kind of see in the corner of your screen a few minutes ago there. But we'll go over to velocity now. This is storm relative, which can be helpful for detecting tornadic action, and we'll have to watch here on the northern periphery for some of the areas of rotation that we are kind of noting here when we have the greens and reds come together a little bit. We'll just have to watch to see how this kind of evolves. You see some maybe heading toward Palm Beach, Broward here. The threat probably a little bit higher as we get further to the south, a little bit closer in here as we're looking toward maybe Broward, Miami-Dade counties here as we're looking ahead, and even down toward the south to an extent as you kind of get on the northeastern quadrant as we get later toward the overnight. So it's important to have those ways to get those alerts. But the core of the system here, as we get further to the south, you can see we have some really strong winds showing up with the actual typical winds that you get in the tropical system itself versus an actual tornadic signature maybe trying to evolve. And you can kind of see some of these stronger winds. We have the movement here still kind of, it looks like off toward the north and west. So overall here, we're just continuing to watch things because with that northwestern movement, some of this is going to be trying to get toward Miami-Dade County. This wind energy here, I'll kind of point it out for everybody at home. You can see this wind energy is kind of trying to pivot in there. So we'll just have to watch here, have to track it. But I'm going to go ahead and go over toward our radar scope computer to give you another perspective right now. We'll go ahead and get on there. You'll be able to see what is happening with some of this moisture. Kind of gives you another radar framework per se to go over, and we'll pop this on right now. You'll be able to see that we even have some lightning being detected right now. So always interesting to take note of there off of Pembroke Pines and Miami itself. You kind of see where the mouse is right in here. So just continuing to watch this storm system as it does have that eye look to it where that center is, where you don't really have too much action going on. But this is an extremely strong system. It's not an extremely strong system, but we're just going to continue to watch it. I know we have those tropical storm alerts getting all the way up there, further up into the state. But we're going to go ahead and pop me back on camera for the time being. Again, we're watching this wind energy here, just continuing to see how it pivots on in. We're going to be watching Homestead here. Some pretty strong winds. North Key Largo, it looks like Cutler Bay as well for sure. It'll be a little more uncertain as we get further north because the ultimate track will kind of determine that. But again, we have Tropical Storm Eta here as we get down toward the Florida Keys, South Florida. A hurricane warning remaining in effect here. And this did get issued earlier today. If you're just kind of new to the information, I know just kind of posting some of that on Twitter earlier. Haven't really put too much out on Facebook here today as we're just kind of getting ready for this special report. And we have to watch it here in North Florida as well. As this is not just a one and done type scenario. It doesn't look like here as we're watching South Florida, and then maybe it kind of goes away. We might have to watch this here till later in the week, which I'll get into here in just a few minutes. But a hurricane warning in play here for the Florida Keys. It looks like, I'll move the map over just a little bit. We're talking about from Ocean Reef to the Dry Tortugas, including Florida Bay here. So that's where the worst of the conditions will be. You kind of see these winds as we're kind of pivoting them across. And then, again, some of this could get into toward Miami-Dade County, even into toward Monroe here as we get into toward the peninsula itself. So we'll continue to watch here as we look at these different radar trends. It's always important to look at radar in this type of scenario, but I do want to look at some power outage information real quick. I know you guys are kind of interested in that, so let me go ahead and pull that here into the system right now. Just trying to switch between some different things as we see these numbers inching on up a little bit as we go over to poweroutage.us right now. We have 28,682 customers in the dark right now, and this is as we get toward the south. You don't see a very high percentage luckily in toward these counties, but I'll just kind of highlight them as we do get to Miami-Dade. You can kind of see it there, and I'll move the mouse back again. 12,588 customers there in the dark as we get toward that region. Monroe County, don't have any noted right now, as they're a little more accustomed to get toward the Keys here, a little more accustomed here to dealing with a scenario like this in terms of seeing some of these tropical conditions. So that'll help them out some as they dealt with Irma so badly a few years ago. It's more of an area where they're used to getting some higher winds sometimes down in that region. But as we look up here in the state, you see Collier a few, Henry a few, and then Glades a few, Martin a couple thousand, Palm Beach County a couple thousand, 2,619 customers in the dark right now. Broward County, I know we're kind of moving the mouse around here, but Broward actually has 9,785 customers in the dark. So we're going to continue to watch here. And if you're watching from North Florida, I'll move the mouse in toward Levy County. A little bit of outages here being reported. A few outages, so we'll just continue to watch here as we look ahead. We have that nor'easter type scenario here as we have the pattern kind of setting up. As we kind of put me back on camera right now, we have that pattern setting up where we have the high pressure there to the north, the low pressure with the system to the south, and that's what's causing rainy conditions around here in toward North Florida. So let's go ahead and switch you over now toward the Jacksonville radar site. You'll be able to see what is happening on that as we see some of the moisture that's in play here. You see some of these scattered showers around. I know I just heard some in the Stark area just a few minutes ago with some of that rain on the roof. So you see some accent there toward Brooker and Bradford County, but also east of Palatka, Jacksonville, we have some rain too, and more that's kind of coming off that northeasterly type wind here. There's nor'easter type conditions going to be impacting our weather here as we move into tomorrow. I'll be talking about those forecast wind gusts here in a few minutes as well. So something to look forward to if you want to kind of see how high I think the winds could go tomorrow. But we have to watch later in the timeline too, because it's not just about tomorrow now. There's a chance tomorrow's accident could be the worst we get here, but the forecast is really uncertain. We don't know what's going to happen later in the timeline. So let me go ahead and pull up satellite here. Interesting scenario where we don't have things organized necessarily on here, where we have that center and you have the accent kind of north-south, but you have some wind there closer to that center. Hybrid type scenario indeed, and you see these northeasterly like winds here moving in. You see the cloud pattern as well, and we'll watch for this, and then we'll also look here at some of our official track information. I know we have a lot in here, so I need to take a few things off before we switch you over to the Hurricane Center information in our system. But now you see, as you look here toward Levy County, this is later in the period, a lot of uncertainty. You see maybe a tropical storm up here, but first off, we just have an area of wind potential we're going to be watching. You see these tropical force winds maybe extending here in toward short to medium term upwards of Tampa per se, and then maybe even a little bit further north. We'll just continue to watch this track. You see it maybe moving west to becoming a hurricane and coming back to the south a little, and then kind of meandering around out there. And I mean, that area we're watching toward Levy, maybe Citrus County, according to this forecast, not getting up the center toward that area till Friday. So interesting to watch for sure. But as we look here, this is going to be at 1 a.m. it looks like, when we have some of the strongest conditions here. We'll be coming back on as necessary throughout the evening and into the overnight hours as well, just depending on when things look like they warrant it. I'll be on here to give you that latest information. But you see around 1 a.m. these red highlighted areas here, the area that's in this red circle per se, is where we're expecting some of the strongest winds that Eta has to offer for South Florida and the Florida Keys. So Marathon, getting up toward Flamingo here. So we're going to continue to watch it, continue to give you the latest information, but I'll go ahead and take off Hurricane Center information for now. I do want to see kind of the discrepancies now here with some of our other tracks, so I'll put now that back on with the model information, and you can kind of see some of the models showing a better consensus, but our GFS model is just kind of showing it meander around. I mean, that green area you see out in toward the Gulf of Mexico, I'll move the map over just a little for this. You see, this is it until Sunday here, folks. A week from now, it's still right in that spot. Now, the consensus seems to be aligning a little bit better. It had kind of done this yesterday and then switched around again with a scenario of it kind of recurving out there further. But looking like we're getting more of a consensus here, maybe a system evolving. You see, one of our models is pretty good for intensity, has us getting all the way to a major hurricane. Now, it really have to get its act together in terms of those parameters. The Hurricane Center forecast only has in it having it getting toward that Category 1 strength, but We're going to continue to watch. You see a Category 1 according to this, then become a tropical storm as it heads for Tampa on Saturday maybe, or later on Friday. But as we look toward our consensus model, it's on a stronger tropical storm here, weakening down a little. You see it coming in. That's early Friday. One thing that's interesting is it's kind of confusing here. You have to kind of pay attention in a way, because this area out here toward the west, this T icon toward the west in the Gulf, that's earlier Friday. Then it has it going up here later Friday and then curving back down again on Saturday. So a lot of uncertainty with this forecast. We just don't know what's going to happen. Just stay tuned on that part of it. But right now I'm here more to break down the nor'easter, break down the impacts here in a shorter term. So let's get down here toward these current winds as we get towards South Florida right now. I know we're continuing to watch some of that as we get toward that region, and just going ahead and zooming down here a little bit, you'll be able to see we have some winds that are pretty high overall as we get toward Fort Lauderdale Executive Airport. A gust of 42 knots there, so that's 48 miles an hour. That can knock out some power. Seeing some of the power outage reports in Broward County. Then we get to Pompano Beach Airport here, 42 knots. So again, talking about 48 miles an hour. And then as we get toward the north here, West Palm Beach, 37 knots. That gets us here over tropical force as well, 43 miles an hour. But as we get closer here toward the storm itself, again, we're looking at radar. We're continuing to watch the system here, get closer toward the Keys. The wind's a little lower right now as we're not in necessarily the heavier downpours that would bring more of that wind energy to the surface. But 23 knots here as we get to Homestead Air Force Base. So only about 26 miles an hour. 23 knots at Marathon Airport, so 26 miles an hour there. A little bit higher toward Key West here, but you kind of get the idea. Some of the stronger winds actually a little to the north, and even in our area we're getting some stronger winds overall with that nor'easter type condition. A gust there, 21 knots at Fernandina Beach there, so 24 miles an hour. We'll continue to look at the live information, but now let's get you to that track here, the official track in our cone perspective. I know this kind of helps people out sometimes, give you a better perspective on what is happening. So we have that hurricane warning. It gets you there from the Florida Keys and Ocean Reef there to the Dry Tortuga, 65 mile per hour maximum sustained winds right now. That moving off toward the northwest at 14 miles an hour, and that minimum pressure 993 millibars. You kind of see this heavy area of wind moving on in, a bigger wind field as well than necessarily you would see even as we're looking down towards some other spots, Nicaragua, when this system was down there. I mean, this is the same system we were talking about. It evolved and came all the way up here now. We were talking about a situation where it was a smaller storm, but a stronger storm. And then you see it tracking now. It gets kind of confusing here. A hurricane as we look toward later Monday maybe. And then as we move it in toward the Gulf of Mexico, you see it weakening back down. And then a 60-mile-an-hour tropical storm making landfall here as we get closer toward North Florida on Friday, according to the official forecast. But it's just highly uncertain. We'll have that moisture around here, that nor'easter type condition, and this could go further off toward the west here, maybe further up toward the due north, or we could just see it fall apart altogether. There's just so many different variables in play. You see these alerts. I mean, we have tropical storm warnings as we get there toward other spots of the region. I'll go ahead and highlight some of those in that dark blue we're talking about from the Brevard-Volusia County line to Inglewood and Lake Okeechobee as well. And then we have a hurricane watch in play for areas along the Florida west coast in case things kind of change here from Golden Beach to Bonita Beach. So there's a lot happening, a lot taking place here. Tropical storm watch as we get further up toward the north, it looks like. I mean, we're going to see areas here from north of Inglewood to Anna Marie Island. Under that, as we get closer toward the Tampa metro, got some tropical alerts as we get across the state, as you would imagine as well. So we'll continue to watch those. But let's give you another look at the Doppler towards South Florida now. We'll get back down there, get back in. If you're just kind of tuning in, you see that center. The storm's moving relatively fast. Some of these stronger winds going to be moving in relatively short order, really, as we get toward parts of the Florida Keys, even parts of Miami-Dade County here as well. Again, you see that center of this storm right in here off of Marathon off of it looks like the Islamorada area. So again, going to continue to watch this. It's moving northwest at 14 according to the last update from the Hurricane Center. So we're going to continue to see here that pressure 993 millibars. So a pretty strong system, a stronger tropical storm, but a hybrid type system where you have a pretty low pressure overall, maybe not a hurricane pressure as I was thinking we might see with tropical force winds, but just an interesting situation, a pretty low pressure type situation here as we're getting down toward these regions. We'll go back over to base velocity right now to see some of these stronger winds. These winds here are going to be moving on in. I can kind of draw an arrow here to see what I'm talking about here. Moving on into the picture over the next little bit. So just kind of stay tuned there. Stay tuned for the latest. You have that tornado threat here further to the north, and I'll be able to highlight the tornado threat a little bit further now as we move away from radar scope. We'll get back over toward our SPC outlook information right now, and we'll be able to see where the highest tornado threat is here as we get later in toward the evening. I know we don't have any tornado warning as of right now. Don't think we've had any as we've gotten down toward the south, but again, we have that threat. You see in the yellow area, our higher tornado threat toward Miami-Dade and toward Monroe, but even a little in Broward too, as we get toward north. I mean, we have to watch all the way here up towards Sebastian and Okeechobee, Clewiston, Naples for an isolated tornado overnight and toward the morning. So even if you're not really in the tropical threat zone per se in terms of those winds, tornadic winds could evolve with a supercell, maybe moving there in from the Atlantic Ocean here in this pattern with this system. So we're going to continue to look at our live software here. Let's get over now toward those most likely arrival times. Those most likely arrival times for those Eta winds. So in South Florida, Florida Keys, continue to target those devices. I know we're getting some of those winds going to be getting stronger though as we look ahead in the next few hours. It looks like, as we showed you, those brighter colors moving on in here pretty quickly. So we'll be just tracking this as you see 8 a.m. Lake Okeechobee, give or take. I mean, that's kind of a little bit misleading in a way because we're already getting some pretty strong winds there. And then this gets really confusing as we get further north. You have to kind of just stay tuned for updates. If we get the winds up here and we're highly uncertain about it, would be later Wednesday into Thursday maybe. But just really hard to say. We're going to be updating you on that, but we're focused more on South Florida. We'll see if it's a hurricane landfall here in the Keys. Could have a landfall, but probably as a strong tropical storm based on satellite presentation and those winds. It went over Cuba, kind of made that look to the storm not be as compact. So that's a little bit of good news in the short term, but we'll continue to watch. I mean, we had K85, the last hurricane that hit the U.S. in November. That was Tallahassee's storm, really. That's really still their benchmark storm. I mean, even with Michael, even with Hermine, the higher winds were in Tallahassee itself. Of course, Panama City, Michael's the benchmark storm over there, obviously. But just trying to kind of give you a little perspective here that we'll have to just watch as we look ahead. Hopefully we don't get winds that strong developing, but one of our models does show that, as you saw a moment ago, as we have Eta here, just a historic season in general, and now the nor'easter type conditions I was referring to for tomorrow here in our local area with the low pressure to the south, the high pressure to the north. We get that kind of the squeeze play here. You have 40-mile-per-hour gusts maybe toward Jacksonville, 45 in Palm Coast, 40 Gainesville as well as you kind of move inland here, and you see Brunswick 35 off toward the west, 30 miles an hour. So we'll just continue to watch everything there. And then in terms of those rainfall amounts, this is uncertain for our area a little bit more so than in South Florida, where we have a little more confidence. We're going to have just quite a bit of rain down there with that flooding potential. I know a moderate risk of excessive rainfall in play as we get down toward that region. So we just have to continue to watch it for sure as you get down here. Looking at some of these colors, we're going to be talking about some more rain coming into the picture here. You see around 5 inches or so, give or take, toward South Florida. 6-7 days, but a lot of this here earlier in the time frame, and some rain according to the forecast right now. We have about an inch or two North Florida, South Georgia. Again, that could change, but as we look to tomorrow, quite a bit of rain will be around toward our region, especially the Jacksonville area with those nor'easter type conditions in play. Let's get back over to radar once again now. We'll see those rainfall totals that we've already seen with this system. You'll be able to see where we've already stacked up those rainfall amounts. That's toward Broward County there, in toward parts of South Florida. You see Fort Lauderdale picking up around 5 inches or so, according to estimates in just the last 12 hours or so. So something they definitely had to concentrate on down there. No flash flood warnings, but just got to be watching here as the rain does pile on up. As you see some more rain here piling up south of the Keys. I know we had one of our systems earlier this year, I think it was Laura there, providing just extensive rainfall as we were getting excessive rainfall amounts toward Key West there. Highest rain they've seen, I believe, since Katrina and Laura. Hopefully we won't get the rain like that here as we get toward Key West, but we'll continue to watch that potential for sure. Again, you see that type formation, but again, that's the center. The axis not really well defined around it, more of a hybrid type setup. So we'll just continue to watch it here, continue to give you the latest updates. We go back over to our graphics once again and give you a look at a storm surge threat, because that's something that we do have to pay attention to down in the Keys, as there's a storm surge warning from Ocean Reef there to the Dry Tortuga. As you see these amounts here, as we look toward the region, 2 to 4 feet in play, 2 to 3 as we get toward Golden Beach here. And then as we look up all the way toward our region, 1 to 2 feet of storm surge, but that's more of a coastal flood type situation. We have the nor'easter, not a type of scenario where we have the storm surge alert going to play. But you see the west coast of Florida. We'll watch for that to be expanded north as we get the latest on the ultimate track here, as this system just come in to go for a while. It's going to become a really slow mover. I mean, it's moving 14 miles an hour right now, but it's not going to keep doing that, unfortunately, as we just have to watch here. Things could kind of pile up. We'll just have to stay tuned here for the very latest. But that movement northwest at 14 is kind of an interesting one here as we go between some of our tools. I'm going to go ahead and measure some things out. And now this is just kind of going to change, of course, as we look here later on in the timeline. But you see toward the Keys, I mean, 56 miles. If you do the math, that's about 4 hours away there from maybe a landfall type scenario over the Keys if it were to continue to move it at that speed. So we'll continue to give you those updates. We're about to wrap it up for now, I believe. We pretty much covered everything we need to. Of course, the state of emergency in effect down towards South Florida. I'm going to be watching that nor'easter type effect up here. Some isolated tornadoes down there. The tornado threat didn't really evolve up here for a while, but could eventually here as we see what happens in the Gulf, as there's just a highly uncertain type situation that is developing here. We'll continue to provide you the latest. I'll come on as necessary throughout the evening, the overnight hours, as we continue to watch Eta here from the Weather Center. There's a look a little bit better at what's happening. We'll go ahead and pull that track on real quick before we wrap it up. I'll leave the models off so we don't clutter it up too much here. We'll get that on here. We'll look at that tornado parameter as well. I know that can be helpful in these scenarios here too. And you see a little bit of that as I'm taking the radar off, evolving off of the Broward, it looks like Palm Beach coastlines here. So we'll have to watch to see if we get some tornado threats, threat down toward Cuba here as well. Not too high of parameters overall though, so that's at least a little bit of good news. But just kind of stay tuned there. Stay tuned as we watch these high winds. These winds pick up. Stewart right now, I guess, to 41 knots. So that's 47 miles an hour. That can knock out some power. Now, these areas are used to maybe winds a little higher than what we saw in North Georgia, per se, where we were looking back with Zeta there earlier on. They had a lot of power outages with winds like these. The storm was also moving fast there, so it was just kind of evolving across that whole region there pretty quick. So we're just going to continue to watch. I'll be back again as necessary, so stay tuned. I'm meteorologist Casey Cloud here in the Weather Center.